Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. And in this video, I'm going to be looking at the weekend of May the 17th and 18th, 2025. I had quite a lot of dreams last night. The time, by the way, now is 7:25 a.m. on Friday the 16th. So last night, there were dreams of destruction, random acts of violence and chaos. And this violence, there was a certain vagueness about it, whether this violence was meted out by the weather, by natural forces, or whether it was just human violence. And I saw these hotels, or they were supposedly hotels. They didn't look very attractive hotels, but all the windows had been smashed. There was a whole bank of glass everywhere smashed, but it was close to the sea. Maybe it was sort of eastern England, could be Essex, for example. The implication might be that it might have been the North Sea, but it was very stormy weather, and I was in a car on this road, but was a large road next to the sea, so it could easily have been a storm that destroyed the windows. And there was sort of orange tape on the road because the police were there, and I was sort of thinking that maybe I should have taken a photograph of this devastation. But then there was another instance where I saw some people involved in quite a complicated act of vandalism, trying to distract people with by taking something away and maybe using it for some destructive purposes. And there seemed to be a purpose there, but I'm not quite sure what that purpose was. And I think my view was fairly neutral on this act of vandalism. But I think there might have been a political purpose there as well. So, I don't know why I'm talking about my dreams, but I do know that this weekend there is a conjunction between the Sun and Uranus. And I do think that we really need to pay attention to this Sun-Uranus conjunction. And it's also linked up with Venus, because we got the Sun making a semi-square to Venus, and we've got other stuff going on. For example, we've got a square between Mercury and Mars, and the beginning of next week, I think we've got a Mars-Saturn sesquiquadrate. But it's the Sun-Uranus conjunction that I really want to look at in this video, or at the end of this video, and to consider, what does it mean and who it might have an impact on. But before I talk about all of that, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for this weekend, which is the weekend of May the 17th and 18th, 2025. So let's look at the positions of the planets this weekend. Here we go. Don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So here is the positions of the planets. By the way, that thing on the top right is not the moon, it is the planet Uranus. It's just a reminder that we do have a conjunction between the Sun and the Uranus over the weekend. So at midnight, New York time, the moon is in Capricorn. So, right at the sort of the middle of a weekend, moon is at 29 degrees Capricorn. So first half of the weekend, moon is moving through this sign. Then on Sunday, it moves into Aquarius. In fact, on Sunday morning London time at 6:21, the moon moves into Aquarius. So you can see that if you're in New York, pretty soon after midnight, we get the sign change. If you're in California, then 9 in the evening on Saturday, the moon changes sign. So, when you have the moon changing sign from Capricorn to Aquarius, at one level, nothing changes, because the moon is moving from one Saturn-ruled sign to another. So there is still a feeling of reserve, but it's negative Saturn versus positive Saturn. Capricorn is the negative sign that Saturn rules. Aquarius is a positive sign. So, and the moon, of course, is moving into an air sign. That is another big difference between Aquarius and Capricorn. Aquarius, is an air sign, whereas Capricorn is an earth sign. So it may be the case that when the moon moves into Aquarius, there's a little more thought, a little bit more contemplation, and we can be more detached. But when the moon moves into Aquarius, it makes a conjunction to Pluto. It does make a sextile to Neptune, but I think that conjunction to Pluto holds sway. And even before the moon moves into Aquarius, in sort of very late Capricorn, it's starting to be influenced by that conjunction to Pluto. So some of us may be of the opinion that we have to hold something back. It's too serious to tell everyone, and we take our feelings as something grave, not to be trivialized. So that Moon Pluto conjunction, shouldn't be ignored. And the main aspect, though, is not about the moon. There are main aspects. There are a couple of aspects of importance. Obviously, we've got Sun conjunct Uranus. This conjunction between the Sun and Uranus takes place pretty close to a square between the Sun and Venus. So you could say that Sun, Venus, Uranus, they're all coming together, and so what does that mean? Well, Sun conjunct Uranus represents events, big things happening. And the Sun conjunct Uranus aspect, it happens every year. So that doesn't necessarily mean every time the Sun conjuncts Uranus you can expect huge events. But this Sun conjunct Uranus may be more dramatic than usual. Firstly, because it's triggered by Venus. You can see it at midnight, middle of a weekend. Venus is at 12 degrees 25 Aries. So Venus is very close to a semi-square to Venus. So it's not just the Sun making a conjunction to Uranus, it's Venus making the semi-square. So you've kind of got a double influence. Additionally, Uranus is conjunct Algol. Now, it's not exactly conjunct Algol. I think it's almost a degree away from this fixed star. But it adds some tone to this aspect. And when you think of Algol, you think of bad things happening, disastrous things happening, and there being a certain unpleasantness in the air. And then, looking at Sunday, we have a square between Mercury and Mars. In fact, we don't just have a square between Mercury and Mars. We have a semi-square between Mercury and Saturn. So you can see that Mercury is at 13 Taurus, making that square to Mars, and Mars is also starting to make a sesquiquadrate to Saturn. So Mercury, Mars, Saturn coming together. Now, Mercury square Mars might just be about angry words. That's a very straightforward interpretation of it. It might be that some of us are just stubborn. We're not prepared to look at alternative views. If we are presented with alternative views, then we might get angry. And there could be a lot of pride flying around. Mars is in Leo, and if someone hears something that undermines their ego, then they're going to react. So that's one way of looking at it. On the other hand, Mars is making a sesquiquadrate to Saturn. Now, that sesquiquadrate to Saturn is not actually exact until Monday, but Mercury is kind of triggering it. So I do think that this weekend does have a Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn feel to it. And so when you're talking about Mars and Saturn together, you might be thinking about frustration, yes, anger, a feeling that one can't do anything and one gets annoyed about it. Of course, when you also think about Mars and Saturn, you might be thinking about death and destruction. It may be about the tone of how we see things, of a weekend, of how we perceive the news. But looking at the weekend in general, it's busy, it's very active, and this activity may not affect us personally, but it does maybe say something about the world in which we're living. And so that's the picture for New York at noon. If we look at the picture for Sydney at noon, not a great deal changes, but the moon. Sorry, I said New York at noon. This is not a daily chart. This chart is, of course, for New York and midnight, when midnight on Sunday the 18th, when Saturday becomes Sunday. So looking at Sydney at noon, it's not so different, but the moon is earlier. Sydney at midnight. Sorry, we're looking at Sydney at midnight. As a representative of Australia and New Zealand, the moon is in Capricorn. So if you are in Australia or New Zealand, that means that the moon is not going to go into Aquarius until probably the late afternoon. So for most of a weekend, the moon is going to be in Capricorn. So that's the main difference, and that means that the main aspect to consider might be a trine between the moon and the sun, which is a pleasant aspect. Moon trine sun, moon in Aquarius trine the sun in Taurus. That moon trine sun may not be such an influence if you're in the Americas, for example, but still the sun is conjunct Uranus and Mercury is square Mars, so you can't get away from that. So I don't think there's necessarily a huge difference between the experience of people in Sydney or Auckland, for example, and those in the Americas. So let me now switch to the heliocentric view, and here it is. And I think that this heliocentric chart, set for midnight on May the 18th, is in its own way quite dramatic. There is a lot going on. And firstly, we've got Venus opposition Jupiter. Venus is slightly off the Jupiter opposition, but Mercury is making a T-square. Not just Mercury, it's Neptune as well. So there's a Mercury-Neptune conjunction, and you've got Venus. You've got this Venus-Mars opposition, and we've got a Sun conjunct Uranus geocentrically. Now that means that it's Earth opposition Uranus heliocentrically. So there's our Earth opposition Uranus aspect. So a lot happening, and when you have got a very active heliocentric chart, it may not mean anything in particular. It just may mean activity, and that's what's happening down here on Earth. Though, Venus opposition Jupiter with Mercury on a T, it's not like Mars. We don't see Mars activity here. It may be about a hope. I mean, I've talked about that before. I've said that Venus opposition Jupiter can be a very optimistic combination, and it might also be about taking things too far. And Mercury is on the Venus Jupiter midpoint, so this may say something about the way our minds are working, and our minds may try to be positive, actually. You could say heliocentrically, Mercury on a Venus-Jupiter midpoint, thinking the best. And so that actually could be quite a good thing. But of course, we don't want to be unrealistic, because it's not just Mercury on a Venus-Jupiter midpoint, it's Neptune there as well. And yeah, we have a Mercury-Neptune conjunction over the weekend. So it's possible that people might act on the basis of wishful thinking this weekend. And I don't think that's especially desirable. And yes, the Sun is conjunct Uranus geocentrically, and the Earth is opposition Uranus. They represent the same thing, but somehow seeing Earth opposition Uranus in the heliocentric chart just tells us what's going on. It gives us a perspective on that tension between the Earth. There's us on Earth trying to make sense of things, trying to have a modicum of stability, and then Uranus comes along, makes the opposition, and that's a very disruptive force. So a lot happening this weekend, regardless of whether you look at things from a geocentric or a heliocentric view. So let me now sort of translate all of that into the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for this weekend, which is the weekend of May the 17th and 18th, 2025. Aries. Aries, you are feeling that you do need to get noticed. You've got plenty to offer, and you feel that you've got a real contribution to make. And it's not just about you and your own selfish interests. It's also about something a little more idealistic. Especially on Sunday when the moon moves into Aquarius. With the moon moving into Aquarius, you have ideas about the way things should be, and you're quite willing to discuss these ideas. You've got a lot to say, and you, in your own way, you could actually be quite optimistic. You believe that things can be fine, and that if you have faith, things will turn out as expected. I mean, is that true? Well, faith is always a problem. Faith, yeah, well, faith. Faith is probably why I'm into astrology. I mean, faith, I find it difficult to believe, and there's something about astrology that it gives one something more tangible. Certain horoscopes are unmistakable. There's something going on, and the reason I am somewhat dismissive of excessive use of asteroids and other incidental factors in a chart is because I want to see a clear message. I don't want to see a chart that is just cluttered with attempts to find some connection. I want clear signatures, because it's through clear signatures in a chart that I can go beyond faith. Anyway, that's just me. As far as you're concerned, you do believe that things can work out, and if you have that fundamental faith, then it will carry you through, and you may actually be quite keen to talk about what you believe, even to defend what you believe. There is something about you, Aries, that is defensive, and one reason for that is the fact that there is a square between Mercury and Mars. Mercury is the communication planet. It's square Mars. So with that aspect, there are things you are going to argue about. You are not going to take kindly to being contradicted. And so that could mean that you might be a difficult person to have around. because there are plenty of things for you to say, plenty of things for you to be critical about. So Aries, ask yourself, is it worth being so critical? Do you have to argue about everything? I mean, I'm not saying you will argue about everything, but I'm saying you could, especially if something comes up that you weren't expecting, that doesn't match with your views, and it might in some cases be a question of pride. If you are being contradicted, then you're not going to just take it. You're going to give people a piece of your mind. And one area where there might be particular irritation is money. Mercury is in Taurus. Taurus is a sign which is quite down to earth, can be financially orientated, and so with Mercury square Mars, if a financial issue comes up over the weekend, then you might just feel that you have no choice. You have to say something, and you're not just going to accept another person's view, which of course could be a good thing. You should never take what anyone says at face value, and so you will be able to give as good as you get when it comes to arguments. But the arguments may extend to what you believe in and to what you have faith in. And if you are contradicted, and if you're told that you believe something which is wrong, you're not going to just accept it. So there could be something rather angry about the weekend. And another thing to point out is that Mars is starting to make a sesquiquadrate to Saturn. Now, this sesquiquadrate to Saturn is not exact until Monday, but as the weekend progresses, I think you might be feeling the power of this aspect. And unfortunately, Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn can be quite a frustrating influence, and you just may feel that you can't get everything done, that something is holding you back, and you might want to resist it. But there are other ways of looking at this Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn. You've got to try to be as constructive as possible. So if something is frustrating, especially on Sunday, late on Sunday, don't automatically assume, for example, that it's someone else's fault, and don't take out your frustrations on other people. Though I must say, I don't want to create frustrations if none exist. That would just be a self-fulfilling prophecy. But when I do your horoscope for Monday, I will be talking about this Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn in some detail. So overall, this weekend is fairly high energy. You are, I think, really going to want to be noticed, and you're going to want to impose your presence. Is it possible to get on with other people? Yes, it certainly is possible, because of the continued influence of that trine between Venus and Mars. Venus is now, getting really close. I know I talk about this Venus trine Mars, all the time, but it's now 1.5 degrees to exactitude, and this Venus trine Mars is just going to make you a nicer person, and it's already giving you a new pleasantness, and you can certainly get on with the right people. And there are some people who increasingly think you are wonderful. So that's all the more reason, not to get too angry in the wrong situation. You've got to give other people a chance, and you've also got to give yourself a chance. You don't want to just assume that things are going wrong, that things are frustrating, that you can't get anything done without shouting. So a bit of mellowness over the weekend might be a good idea. Taurus, looking at the heliocentric chart, Venus is still making an opposition to Jupiter. And this Venus-Jupiter opposition can be looked at in a positive and a negative way. I think that with Venus opposition Jupiter, there's something about you that really can be positive, and really wanting things to work, and believing that of all the possibilities, the best possibility can come true. And you can, I think, this weekend really be very generous, and you want people to be happy, and a bit of generosity can go a long way. Though this heliocentric Venus opposition Jupiter could go too far. There's a danger of being over generous, perhaps being a little overindulgent, especially if this Venus opposition Jupiter is linked with heliocentric Mercury and Neptune. So you've kind of got this T-square. You've got Venus opposition Jupiter, and then you've got Venus on the tail. Let me just remind you what I'm talking about. There is a heliocentric chart for this weekend, and there is Venus, which is your ruler, and so it's opposition Jupiter, and it's sort of square Mercury, it's square Neptune. So Venus heliocentrically is actually quite prominent, and it's just important that you don't take things too far. And additionally, you need to remember your priorities, and your priorities might slightly change over the weekend. The weekend starts with the moon in Capricorn, and then it moves into Aquarius. And when the moon does move into Aquarius, you might find that you become more concentrated on what matters, what you need to do. It might be a Sunday when the moon is moving through Aquarius, but that doesn't really concern you. The thing is, there are things you need to do, and when Pluto moves into Aquarius, it straight away starts making a conjunction to Neptune. So, moon conjunct Neptune could be about what you feel you need to achieve right now, and you're going to want to do it straight away, and you won't be sympathetic to any resistance or to sort of alternative views. And sometimes it's great to be single-minded. If you're single-minded about the right thing, and you've done your calculations and you've got your calculations right, then you can achieve a huge amount. Of course, if you are single-minded about something which hasn't properly been thought through, then of course there could be problems. And one aspect we do have is a conjunction between the Sun and Uranus. Happens this weekend, and additionally Venus is involved with this aspect. We have a semi-square between the Sun and Venus. We have a semi-square between Venus and Uranus. So Venus, your ruler, is linked up with this Sun-Uranus conjunction. And that may be about your own stubbornness, because Uranus is quite a stubborn influence. So Venus semi-square Uranus could be, this is what you want to do, and you're not going to allow anyone to stop you. And that could be a good thing or a bad thing. I think too much stubbornness and refusing to change, can be dangerous. Additionally, we have to think about events. Events can take place externally. They can take place also in your own mind. You can have ideas, but with events and ideas comes a possibility of shock. Starting to see that things are not really as you expected, and you have to take into account changing circumstances. And can you continue with a plan when the external world has changed, or when you realize something? And so, what do you do? So don't be too single-minded this weekend, because if you are, then you might get yourself into a situation that is really quite difficult to get out of. And at the same time, Taurus, don't think that you have to do everything on your own. You don't. Support is available, and certain people are there for you if you ask. I mean, no one's going to help you if you don't ask, if you don't create some lines of communication. But right now with Venus making a trine to Mars, 1.5 degrees away from that trine to Mars and getting closer, that really does indicate to me that people can help, and people can also be a sounding board. Don't be resistant to alternative opinions, and don't be in a situation where familiarity breeds contempt. You may know someone so well that you don't think they've got anything to offer. You've heard it all before, but just because you know someone very well doesn't mean they're useless. Doesn't mean that you've heard everything. They might have some pearls of wisdom for you, and if you give them a chance. And also with that Venus trine Mars, if you're just interested in relationships, getting on with people, you can, provided you're not too stubborn, you're not too wound up in yourself and your priorities. Gemini, probably the main aspect this weekend, the aspect that you really should be focusing on, or indeed the aspect that may force you to give it attention, is a square between Mercury and Mars. And this aspect between Mercury and Mars is important because it involves your ruler. And so we've got Mercury in Taurus, square Mars, and it's an aspect that can be quite verbal. You've got things to say, and you may express yourself with a degree of anger, and in fact the anger might surprise you, because at the moment with Mercury in Taurus, at some level you don't really want to get noticed all the time, and you value your own privacy, and you're maybe trying your hardest to keep your opinions to yourself, but it might be difficult. And Mercury square Mars just might mean that you just can't help yourself. You just have to say it, and when you do say it, when you do speak, you'll be able to speak with power and with conviction, and maybe with a bit of anger. Now, if you are an introverted Gemini, then you might feel that you want to keep some of your feelings to yourself. I'd be careful with introversion. I mean, I've done a psychological test, long ago, which puts me off the scale on the introversion stakes. And you might think, why? Of course, I've got my sun in Gemini, and you might think, well, I'm not an extrovert because I'm doing these YouTube videos. But that's not really what extroversion is about. People who are introverts can speak a lot. They can do videos. They can try their hand at public speaking, even if they're not very good at it. But it's because it's all set out. I know what I'm going to say in this YouTube video. I have control. If you are an extrovert, you're better at spontaneous communication. You can call people up, out of the blue. You can talk to anyone. You're good at small talk, but that's not really kind of me. And I always have this certain nervousness with unscheduled communication, especially if there's some power differential there. So it kind of depends. But if you are, for some reason, feeling introverted, or you're not comfortable with social contact, then the Mercury-Mars square might be about sort of irritation, just tension. Something you want to say, but you can't say it for whatever reason, and that could make you very nervous. So if you are feeling nervous at all over the weekend, it's important that you find some way of expressing that nervousness. Now, one way would be just to say what's on your mind and tell people, even if it's painful. Okay, maybe it's not the right thing to do because you don't know what the impact's going to be, but there's a lot to be said for openness. If you can't be open, then find a way of expressing yourself. You could just write it down, or you could concentrate on something else, like taking some exercise. That might burn off some tension. So that might be a way of approaching this Mercury square Mars. But ideally, with this Mercury square Mars, you would you'd say something, and you see what happens. What is the result going to be? And it might be the case that when you actually talk about something, even if you don't want to talk about something, the very process of talking just makes you feel better and makes you become aware of possibilities that didn't exist before. And so that's something you need to think about. You listen to someone's feedback, and you're thinking that something that you thought was hopeless may actually really be possible. And another aspect today is a conjunction between Mercury and Neptune, but heliocentrically. It's a heliocentric conjunction, so you don't see that geocentrically. But a heliocentric conjunction between Mercury and Neptune could allow you to tune into something else. It gives a different flavor to the day. Now, could be quite optional, that you're sort of working at some higher level, some higher cosmic spiritual level, and you get some information that you weren't expecting. I mean, that's Mercury conjunct Neptune in the most positive way. On a negative side, it's possible that Mercury conjunct Neptune may be a little bit confusing, getting some information that you misunderstand, and that information might be not about your own personal life or about people but about what's happening out there on this planet in which we all live, and you might jump to conclusions. So with Mercury conjunct Neptune, treat it as something high level and fairly spiritual. Don't try to bring it down to earth too much, because then you might get a little confused. Cancer, the moon is sort of changing sign. So we have Saturday, where the moon is largely in Capricorn, and then we got Sunday where it's in Aquarius. So this sign change could influence you, and you may find that Saturday is a different day to Sunday, and on Saturday you know that other people are important up to a point, but the question is, what do they do? Where are they going? What are they? What are they offering? And it's perhaps all rather optional. So if you don't want to do anything on Saturday, you probably don't have to. But that would probably be a waste. With the moon making a trine to the sun and also making a trine to Uranus, because we have a conjunction between the sun and the Uranus, and so with that moon making a trine, other people could be interesting and even exciting if you give them a chance. So on Saturday and into Sunday, do see what other people are doing, and take an interest. You might not, in the first instance, be interested, but you just never know, and there might be a social or even some kind of relationship opportunity that you might miss if you just do nothing on Saturday. And really you should be taking advantage of the moon moving through the last degrees of Capricorn, and that gives you a chance to see what other people are up to. And there could be events and surprises. There is a conjunction between the Sun and Uranus this weekend on Saturday. I think it's on Saturday. It kind of depends where you are. When is the Sun conjunct Uranus? I should tell you. The Sun conjunct Uranus is it's actually London time. It's the early Sunday, so if you're in Asia or Australia, it will be on Saturday. So it kind of depends where you are. But this Sun conjunct Uranus is an important event, and you can probably take advantage of it by being with other people, just observing on what they've got to offer, and there just could be something surprising that you weren't expecting. And at some level, Cancer, you need a few surprises, because surprises can shake your views, and additionally can make life more exciting. And there's nothing wrong with a bit of excitement. And then the moon changes sign. It moves from Capricorn into Aquarius. And with the moon moving into Aquarius, well, the first big aspect the moon makes when it moves into Aquarius is a conjunction to Pluto. So it's possible that Sunday is a more serious day than Saturday. You realize that there are important things to consider, that you need to take them on board, and things that used to be quite trivial now may become crucially important, and you're going to want things to be done increasingly your way as Sunday progresses, and your own independence is going to matter. And so that means that on Sunday, I think that you're going to be probably less sociable than Saturday. That's why if you want to have a fun social life, then try to focus your energies on Saturday. By Sunday, things might have changed, and you might be in a different mood, and there may be a couple of things that you feel that you absolutely have to pay attention to. Perhaps before the new week, you want to get them out of the way. You want to understand what's happening, and you might have questions that need to be answered, and you need to find answers to these questions on your own. Other people are not going to be helpful. If you do ask some questions, they might just clam up, or they might say something which is just not true, or is just vague. And if you want to really understand the truth, that could be, Cancer, a solitary pursuit. Leo, the big event this weekend is a conjunction between the Sun and Uranus, and I will be talking in detail about this conjunction later in the video. But for you, it does matter. And the Sun is not just conjunct Uranus; it is actually making a semi-square to Venus, and so you could say that those two aspects really dominate the weekend, and you could argue that the Sun semi-square Venus is just intensifying the conjunction between the Sun and Uranus. So with this Sun conjunct Uranus, you may have to decide, which way it goes. Is it about you being surprised, or is it about you delivering the surprises, or is it both? I mean, it could be both, but maybe you need to take hold of this energy. With astrology, if you ignore something and you decide not to take it seriously, then it works in its own way. It's arguably out of control. So you could have this Sun conjunct Uranus around, just waiting to deliver a surprise. Or you could grasp the Sun conjunct Uranus with both hands and say, well, it's your aspect and you're going to make it happen in your own way. So perhaps you should seize the symbolism of the aspect and decide that it's going to be you delivering the surprises in whatever you're doing. So if you're meeting people, don't conform to anyone's expectations. Okay, I don't want you to be out of control just for the sake of it, but expectations are there to be broken, and your job might be to break these expectations. Do something that no one was expecting, or at least say something or wear something. You want to be different, and not just different for the sake of it. You want to be different almost out of self-preservation, because if you are different, you are in control of the Sun-Uranus energy. You are becoming that Sun-Uranus conjunction, and so that's perhaps what you should try to do. And you certainly do stand out. You can stand out, and this is especially the case if over the weekend you're doing something that is high profile, that is in public, where you're maybe working with other people. You should be the one in control, and it's okay actually to be quite stubborn. If Sun is conjunct Uranus, well, it's in Taurus, it's in a fixed sign, and if you want to have an impression, a particular impression, then now might really be the time to do it. Now, you can't be friends with everyone, and the Sun does make a semi-square to Venus, and Uranus makes a semi-square to Venus as well. So it is possible that there is something about your approach that not everyone appreciates. And when thinking about relationships and how you deal with people, there may just be a certain lack of comfort. It may not be entirely easy, and I don't think that you should make any special effort to make another person feel happy and comfortable, because if you were to do that, you would at some level be compromising yourself. And harmony and comfort, these are not necessarily natural states, though we shouldn't forget that this weekend the moon is making a trine to the Sun. The moon is also making a trine to Uranus. So it could be that late on Saturday, whenever this moon trine Uranus, moon trine Sun comes in, it might be that your individual approach is fine, that you can actually force your ideas about harmony and peace onto other people. It's your ideas. Whatever you think is harmony, that can be fine. But it's not about you harmonizing to other people. It's about other people harmonizing to you. And if they don't like it, then that really isn't your problem. So, Leo, it's okay to be a little bit self-centered. and that is the nature of Leo. That is absolutely, the nature of the sign. And at some stage, the moon will change sign. The moon will move out of Capricorn and into Aquarius. And so, when the moon is in Aquarius, making a conjunction to Pluto, because that's the first main aspect that the moon makes when it moves into Aquarius, is a conjunction to Pluto. So, when it makes that conjunction to Pluto, the focus might well be on other people and how they relate to you. And moon conjunct Pluto could be about another person trying to have an influence, perhaps trying to have an influence on you, but that, or at least that might be your perception. But it's not a time to be worrying about other people and what they're doing, and trying to be nice to people. And with that moon conjunct Pluto, you could be aware of the beginnings of some kind of a power struggle. So although the Sun conjunct Uranus is asking you to be very focused on yourself, that doesn't mean to say that you should be totally insensitive. You need to try to understand, what people are thinking, what people are planning, and you need to, if possible, change your approach accordingly, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to be in control, and you're trying to be the one that really can make things happen. Virgo, we have a square aspect between Mercury and Mars, and this Mercury-Mars aspect, it could be a little bit disturbing. I mean, Mercury is really stirred up by Mars, and of course Mercury is your ruler. So this Mercury-Mars square might encourage you to say quite a lot, or feel that you have to say something, and your words might not always be easy to deal with. People might respond to you quite negatively, and one reason for that is that you're capable of being quite abrasive. I mean, Virgos are capable of being abrasive in general. I mean, Virgos can be very critical. It's a Mercury-ruled sign. They notice things, and if they notice something, well, they can't just keep it to themselves. You have to be honest, don't you? And so you may be more critical than usual, and your language might be quite harsh. And whether or not that is a good thing or a bad thing, well, it depends, doesn't it? It depends on the situation. But whatever you're doing, Virgo, you must be aware of the power of your own words. And words are not just something negative. Words can also be about expressing your hopes and your ambitions and how you'd like things to be. And you have under it all a certain faith at the moment. You kind of feel that things can work out, and this is a faith that perhaps you want to express. And expressing a faith is always a difficult thing, because we live in a world which is really quite cynical. I've got my Mercury in late Leo, and so when I was at school, university, a lot of the people I was friends with had Uranus in Virgo, and I was kind of aware of this tension between Uranus and Leo and Virgo. Obviously, I didn't know, when I was at school, university, I didn't know about astrology, but after the event, I sort of was thinking about it. And the Uranus and Virgo generation are just a little bit more questioning, maybe not quite as naive as the Uranus in Leo generation. And I think I was aware of that. I would say something in a sort of optimistic way, and I would have some sort of vague idea about something, and then it would be shot down maybe by the harshness of Uranus in Virgo. And so, Virgos can be a bit harsh when it comes to big ideas, nice ideas, but at the moment, Virgo, maybe you have to reconsider. Maybe you have to think. Maybe you have to think about what you really believe in. It's going to be difficult to actually believe in something and to have faith, and you've got to have faith somewhere along the line. Or we shouldn't forget that the new Pope, Pope Leo XIV, he has a sun in Virgo, so one assumes he has plenty of faith. So there's no doubt that Virgos can have faith. Of course, there is a view that Jesus was a Virgo. There's a book by Percy Seymour, which talks about the horoscope of Jesus, and if I remember rightly, he comes to the conclusion that all things being equal, Jesus was probably had his sun in Virgo, and his faith was tested. But the issue of faith at the moment, Virgo, could be important, and maybe you need to make the effort to tell people what you have faith in, and you're critical about your own faith, but you can't be too critical, and maybe you've got to put things to the test, and maybe it's a time to actually be advocating for what you believe in, and not being afraid of having to argue your case, or not being afraid of being criticized. And so, Virgo, what is it you believe in, and where might you be accused of being over optimistic? And maybe through your Virgo intellect, you can have another look at your beliefs and work things through. And if there are areas which seem a bit vague, maybe you can cover that and come up with solutions, come up with answers, so that you have a solid case that you can always defend your ground. Libra, the heliocentric picture was certainly interesting. We looked at the heliocentric chart, and the heliocentric chart did show an opposition between Venus and Jupiter. Here's just a reminder. So this is a heliocentric chart, and there's Venus, opposition Jupiter, Venus square Mercury. So Venus is quite prominent in the heliocentric chart, and that may say something about you, Libra, because Venus is your ruler, and Libra, you may feel that you want to take something further, and there just may be a belief that things can be great if you're given a chance, and additionally, you may be more generous than usual, and you want to give other people a chance, and you could be generous with your time and your resources, and that's good up to a point. With Venus opposition Jupiter, you might take things too far and give away too much, and I know you want to create a pleasant world, but it's not all up to you, and over generosity could be a bit of a problem. So try to have an awareness of other people, and it's important to get on with them, but you also need to be ever so slightly judgmental. Now, you don't have to be judgmental with what you say. You don't want to make people feel uncomfortable, but you can almost be judgmental on a sort of an inner level, and you find yourself judging people and reaching conclusions about them, and that might actually be a good thing, because if you know who you're dealing with, that's going to allow you to make good decisions about how to behave and how much to give away. Yeah, you often have to give something away, but you don't want to give everything away. So that's something you need to think about. Also, don't allow yourself to be offended. There is a square between Mercury and Mars this weekend, and this Mercury Mars square is quite critical. It's about people saying things which they don't always mean. Words, they could be cheap, because there are so many words, and Mercury square Mars can be how anger impacts what we say and also what we write. So if you hear something over the weekend that you find upsetting, or you read something you find upsetting, maybe you'll get an email or a text message, just consider the possibility that someone doesn't mean what they're saying, or that there's just a little bit impulsiveness here. It's very easy to say something or write something, but it's not necessarily a good way of judging another person. So if you are going to judge people, and I think there's nothing wrong with judging people, then you have to look beyond the words, and you have to look at the underlying personality. And if you can do that, then I think that you'll be able to make the right decisions and draw the right conclusions. And the moon does change sign over the weekend. So it starts a weekend in Capricorn, and then it ends a weekend in Aquarius. And all things being equal, I would have said the Aquarius side of a weekend is possibly going to be easier than the Capricorn side. With the moon in Capricorn, okay, the moon does make a trine to the Sun, trine to the Uranus in Capricorn. So, yeah, that might be pleasant. On Saturday, if you can just shut out the world somehow, it could be difficult, but if you can, then you may feel with that moon trine Sun, a degree of balance. And of course, that's what Librans are always looking for. But then Sunday, when the moon moves into Aquarius, things change. The moon doesn't just move into Aquarius, it makes a conjunction to Pluto, and it could be a call for action and a call for just making the most of yourself and whatever it is that you have, and you have got a lot. And on Sunday, as Sunday gets underway, you might find that it's just easier to enjoy yourself and find something that you're really interested in, almost to the point of obsession. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of obsession, but if you can just get obsessed with one thing, really enjoying it, and not being too bothered by what other people are saying, and not being put off. So it might actually be a weekend that ends on a note of just feeling good about yourself. Yeah, but provided you're not too distracted by what other people are saying, writing, and claiming. Scorpio, it is an active weekend. A lot of different things are going on, and some of these things could have an effect on the average Scorpio. So, for example, we've got a conjunction between the Sun and Uranus, and this Sun-Uranus conjunction is in Taurus. It's in your opposite sign, and additionally, the Sun is making a semi-square to Venus. Now, these aspects may say something about you and other people and how you respond to other people, and indeed how other people respond to you. Now, when you hear Sun conjunct Uranus, you do think of earthquakes, things happening that you weren't expecting. Also, that Sun conjunct Uranus is conjunct the fixed star Algol, the head of the demon. That's a fixed star that can be rather difficult, and that may say something about the people around you. And so this weekend, other people could be a law unto themselves, and they may be difficult to predict. You expect them to do one thing and they do something else, and if your expectations get contradicted, then you might get upset. You might feel that you're knocked off course, and then you've got Sun semi-square Venus. I do think that relationships could be put under pressure. You may be aware that you and another person are not entirely compatible. The question is, how long does this last for? Are we talking about a permanent state of incompatibility, or something temporary? Remembering that Venus is making a trine to Mars. So Venus trine Mars, this aspect, again, not exact this weekend, but it's getting closer and closer to exactitude. And so this Venus, I keep forgetting when that Venus trine Mars is exact. Is it May the 25th? I think it's May the 25th. Yeah, it's May. Oh, actually, it's earlier than that. It's May the 23rd. So by the end of next week, you've got Venus trine Mars, and so that can be about a relationship really working. But this weekend, that Sun semi-square Venus, there just could be a lack of comfort, and just feeling that you and another person are just not necessarily going in the right direction or the same direction, and you might be at odds with one another. I suspect it's just a passing phase, and so Scorpio, you need to have a little bit of toleration. But how much toleration are you actually going to have? Because Mercury is making a square to Mars, and so Mercury square Mars is actually quite an angry aspect. It's a very verbal aspect as well. So Mercury and Mars, it's got something. It's about having a lot to say. It's about words which are powered by anger. At least that's one approach, or at least powered by strong feelings. And you may feel that you have to say things in a very clear, even angry way, and you'll certainly get noticed. But what will be the impact of those words? And Mercury square Mars might additionally be about a person doing something you don't like, or saying something you don't like, and you feeling that you absolutely have to respond. And that would especially be the case if you're working over the weekend, or if you're involved in some business, or you've got a high profile. But it could happen in other situations. So the question is, Scorpio, how far do you actually go? And just because you're irritated with something or someone doesn't necessarily mean that you have to shoot your mouth off. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to show your irritation. And of course, there are different ways of showing your irritation. This weekend does incline all of us to impulsiveness, doing the first thing that comes to mind. But if we can just stop what we're doing and consider the possibility that we can rephrase things, or that we can approach a problem in a way that is more indirect, perhaps a little more subtle, that could save us a lot of grief. Sagittarius. Sagittarius, at the moment, there is a lot of action. I do think that it could be quite a busy weekend for a lot of people. Is it going to be a specifically busy weekend for you? Well, from a heliocentric view, Jupiter is quite strongly configured. I mean, heliocentrically, Venus is still opposition Jupiter, and because heliocentrically Jupiter has gone into Cancer. Heliocentrically, of course, not geocentrically. So that Jupiter aspect, I do think needs to be considered. Now let me just show you the heliocentric chart. I mean, I've already shown it to you, but here's a geocentric picture, and so geocentrically, Venus is opposition Jupiter. We already know that Neptune is opposition Jupiter, although that Neptune opposition Jupiter is a little bit wide, but it's still in play. And additionally, Mercury is a square Jupiter. So from a Sagittarian view, something is trying to stir you up. Something is asking you to do something. And Mercury square Jupiter and square Venus, you might have ideas and you think you can do something to make the world a better place. But how easy is it going to be? This is a heliocentric chart. A heliocentric chart is rather impersonal. It's not like the geocentric chart. And so you might have vague ideas about what you can do, what you should be doing, but actually putting them into practice down here on planet Earth might be a little difficult, and you shouldn't be in a hurry. It may take its time, and it's just important that you concentrate on what you can do and what you're good at, and if you can do that and sort of maybe talk about what you can do, tell people about your past achievements and how the present looks to you, and but don't do this in a boastful way. You're just making your position clear, and it may be a situation where other people can take advantage of your presence and your abilities, or they might not be able to, but it shouldn't matter. The point is you are doing your best, and as far as the geocentric positions are concerned, there's a load of stuff going on. Mercury is square Mars, Sun is conjunct Uranus, Sun is semi-square Venus, but I don't think any of these aspects directly impact you, and perhaps that's a good thing. It does give you more freedom. It doesn't mean that you're under a huge amount of pressure. You're not. Probably, of the 12 signs, you have more freedom than most, at least this weekend. And, additionally, don't get upset by what people say. People say all sorts of things. And this weekend, it might be difficult to keep track of other people's words, whether the words are written or spoken. And maybe it's a time when you should take what people say with a pinch of salt. It might seem as if it really does impact you in a personal way, but it doesn't. And that means Sagittarius, that does mean Sagittarius, that you can have a certain amount of detachment. You don't have to take things personally, and that might be the best approach. Capricorn, the moon is changing signs. It's moving out of Capricorn into Aquarius. But on Saturday, the moon is in Capricorn for the whole day. Okay, maybe if you're in California or Hawaii or Alaska, at the end of Saturday, the moon moves out of Capricorn into Aquarius. But you can regard Saturday as a moon in Capricorn day, and it's a day when there probably isn't going to be so much pressure. And so if you want to do things, then, maybe you should concentrate your energies on Saturday. I mean, there'll be things going on Sunday, but just Sunday could just in general be a more complicated day for everyone. So, on Saturday we've got the moon in Capricorn. It's starting to make an aspect to Uranus, trine aspect to Uranus. It makes a trine aspect to the Sun, and so you should find that things come together, quite nicely. And if you put in the effort, and not much effort, I don't think that's going to be necessary. If you do put in a bit of effort, then I think it's likely that you will be rewarded, because things will just be easy. And additionally, there is a conjunction between the Sun and Uranus this weekend. Now, some people might find this conjunction a problem. I don't think you will find it a problem. I think you might actually find it quite interesting. And so, if you're out and about, seeing what's available, then you might be surprised, but I think in a pleasant way. And you might realize that, something really can be fun. You weren't sure, but perhaps you find a way of enjoying yourself in a way that is, very sincere, but, you are taking advantage of what can be available. So, have a pleasant Saturday. That is important. Now, Sunday, things probably get a little more complicated, and there are a few reasons for this. Well, firstly, the moon is changing sign. The moon is moving out of Capricorn. It's moving into Aquarius. It's making a conjunction to Pluto. It may be that some Capricorns find that money becomes an issue. You didn't really want money to be an issue, but with moon making conjunction to Pluto, someone could get stuck on something financial. And it could be you see that something does require attention. It could be about money, or what you have, what you don't have, and you do keep going. You can't necessarily get it out of your mind. Additionally, as Sunday gets underway, two other aspects start to make themselves clear. Firstly, Mercury is starting to make a semi-square to Saturn. And then on Monday, we've got Mars making a sesquiquadrate to Saturn. So those two aspects, Sunday, Monday, are not to be underestimated. They could be complicated. Mercury semi-square Saturn might be about you really having to take something seriously. It might not be fun, but it's important. And from a verbal view, you might feel that you have to have strong words, that something needs to be said, and then you're preparing for Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn on Monday, and that aspect. Okay, I don't want to talk too much about it now, because I'll be talking about it when I do your horoscope for Monday. But Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn can be quite frustrating, and you may find that there's something you're involved with that doesn't necessarily work out in the way you expect, and you might get annoyed, and you might become a little bit obsessed about it. So Capricorn, you have to use your strength, and however difficult a problem is, there is going to be a way round it. And it could be that it's just about saying the right thing and perhaps showing some anger. And that's certainly something that Capricorn can do by the end of a weekend, showing verbal anger. And it could be quite spectacular. So maybe on Sunday, if we want to be really constructive, and you do find that something is bothering you, something isn't working, you may find that the best way of dealing with it is to actually look at what the problem is, or even who the problem is. It might be all about another person. And if you express your anger, and you tell someone about the problem and how you want a solution, you may get a reaction, and a fortunate reaction, but it's all going to be a bit hard work, and it all could be a bit stressful, but a bit stressful. I mean, don't worry about it too much, though. And as far as Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn on Monday, don't worry. I'll be talking about that when I do your horoscope for Monday, which is what's that going to be? Monday the 19th. Aquarius. The Sun is making a few aspects this weekend. The Sun is conjunct Uranus, and this Sun conjunct Uranus aspect, is serious. It's a major event. The Sun Uranus conjunction, does happen every year, so it's not completely rare. But when it does happen, you do need to take it into consideration. Now, this Sun Uranus conjunction is on Algol, a sort of fixed star related to sort of disastrous events. I mean, that's one view of Algol. There are some positive interpretations of Algol, but it's not exactly on Algol. But the Sun-Uranus conjunction really can't be avoided, and also the Sun is making a semi-square to Venus, and so the Sun is in Taurus. It's in a fixed sign, and you, Aquarius, you're a fixed sign. So this may well have an impact on you, the Sun-Uranus conjunction. I mean, this would especially be the case, by the way, if you were a late Aquarius, if your Sun or your Ascendant or your Moon is, say, at from, say, 25 degrees Aquarius onwards. But I think it could affect, all Aquarians. And so this Sun-Uranus conjunction, it might be a little bit destabilizing. That might be how it feels. You might feel that you had taken something for granted, and you felt you knew where you were, and then the Sun-Uranus comes along and it sort of messes things up. And it being the weekend, people over the weekend, they tend to spend more time than usual at home or with their family, and that sounds great, doesn't it? But with Sun-Uranus conjunction, things can happen. So don't assume that domestic arrangements are all going to work out as planned. And there could be things happening at home, maybe with domestic appliances, or it might be with your family, but you hadn't expected, and there might be a sense of, what do you do if something goes wrong, if something doesn't go to plan? And with that Sun conjunct Uranus, it's important that you are flexible, that you don't just panic when the script gets broken, when someone or something goes off script. And this Sun conjunct Uranus may, or additionally, may say something about other people's behavior, people who you thought you could trust, people who you thought you knew well, and they may do something you just weren't expecting. And again, it's another situation where you shouldn't panic. You should allow people to be individuals. And that sounds obvious, doesn't it? Allow people to be individuals, but in reality, it's not obvious at all. We tend to objectify everyone. People have their roles in our life, and we assume they're going to behave in a particular way that supports our view. And then when they do something unexpected, when they show themselves to be individuals, we get upset. And we might even start to blame them. And that's not the right approach. And as an Aquarius, you should really respect other people's individuality. But respecting other people's individuality doesn't mean that you should allow anyone to be sort of obnoxious or to really try to be, to be sort of super disruptive. It's good that people express their individuality, but there can be limits. So don't allow yourself to be messed around or taken for granted. And if someone has made a promise, maybe you should expect them to keep that promise. But if someone breaks a promise, find out why they're breaking a promise. Maybe they've got a good reason to do it. I mean, I'm not saying any of this is going to happen, but I'm just saying that with this Sun conjunct Uranus, you should be open to the possibility that people might behave in a way or say things that you really hadn't considered. And additionally, there is a possibility that you project. You might see other people as being unpredictable and unreliable, but what about your own unpredictability? You might do things or say things which could actually be very disruptive. You might not even know you're being disruptive, and you are going to have a certain way with words this weekend, written word, spoken word, which is going to be powerful. Remember, there is a square between Mercury and Mars at the moment, and this Mercury-Mars square actually links up with Saturn, because Mercury is making a semi-square to Saturn, and on Monday Mars is making a sesquiquadrate to Saturn, and this does make you very verbal, and you can use your words with incredible power, and at the same time your words can actually be incredibly destructive, and you may not actually be aware of how destructive they can be. So Aquarius, do be careful what you say. And additionally, don't allow yourself to get too angry. Certain things really could make you annoyed, especially on Sunday and into Monday. And the question is, what do you do with the anger? And you have to be reasonable and not too reasonable, because if you're too reasonable, you just let things happen. But you've got to show your anger, or perhaps it's your displeasure, in a way that is constructive, and try to be as subtle as possible, and you don't necessarily say the first thing that comes to mind. Pisces, it's a complicated weekend. I mean, astrologically, for everyone, there's just a huge amount of things going on, and so all of us are going to be affected. Are you going to be affected? Well, in some ways, Pisces, you're probably going to be less affected than some of the other signs, and you may have a degree of choice, and you may additionally have the opportunity to sort of phase out if you don't like the way things are going. So you don't have to feel that you have to stay with things. If things are not going your way, then you can move from sort of one place to another. And so I don't think there's any great sense of obligation, and you don't have to see things through to any final conclusion. There is a square aspect between Mercury and Mars this weekend, and it could be quite an angry aspect. It could be about people expressing their feelings and expressing their anger and their frustrations. And do you have to be part of it? Well, no, you don't. You can, if you see that people are annoyed about something, you can just leave. You can just go away, and you can leave them to their own devices. Well, unless you feel that you've got something useful to say. Though, with that Mercury square Mars, that might say something about other people, the people you are close to even. And that means that you should not be offended by another person's strong words, because the impulse of those strong words is short-lived. But if someone is important, you shouldn't ignore what they say. But you just don't want to exaggerate, and you just need to get things in perspective, and it may just be enough to just show that you're listening. If someone thinks you're listening, well, then they'll speak, and they'll keep talking, and maybe things will resolve themselves. So as far as what you're doing, there is a conjunction between Sun and Uranus today, and this weekend, and this Sun-Uranus conjunction is semi-square Venus, and you might say with this Sun-Uranus conjunction that perhaps you should be careful about your movements over the weekend, and don't, for example, go on sort of unnecessary journeys. You might feel you just want to go somewhere for no particular reason, and you go somewhere, perhaps in your car, but things don't work out. And so the shortest of journeys could create the greatest of problems. It could. So unnecessary traveling really should be avoided with that Sun-Uranus conjunction, and maybe even unnecessary phone calls. So look at your phone and who you're calling, who you want to send messages to. Is it really necessary? Because people are tense at the moment, and it just could be that just calling someone up is just asking for trouble. It's creating a situation where there's limited possibilities of benefit, gain, even satisfaction, amusement, but quite a few possibilities for just things happening, you hearing things, you having to listen to things that you just don't really want to deal with, but that might spoil your weekend. So maybe from a communication perspective, you should sort of slow things down. I'm not saying you should cut off communications, but do you have to be involved with it? And the answer is probably not. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And I now want to look at the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is the weekend going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 32, which is duration. And duration is about seeing something through. We want to just carry on with what we're doing, and the idea is that, in the end, it should work out if we just stick with it. And that's going to be the temptation. And I say temptation because duration, sticking with it is not always the right thing to do. I mean, part of a problem is that if we look at the astrology of this weekend, we've got a lot going on. Sun conjunct Uranus, Mercury square Mars. Mars is starting to make a sesquiquadrate to Saturn. That happens on Monday. And should we keep going on in an unchanging way through all this chaos? I'm not sure if that's necessarily a good idea. And there are two moving lines, and the third line moves and the fourth line moves. And the third line moving is not necessarily fortunate. The third line in the I Ching moving it's often a difficult line, and one problem might just be inconsistency. If you're going to keep going with something, you really have to keep going with something, and it's easy to be knocked off our path. Well, of course it's going to be easy to be knocked off our path because there's so much happening, because you've got Sun conjunct Uranus. That Mercury square Mars is a distractor. It might be something someone says, something we might just think about something which knocks us off course. And it's going to be very, very difficult for us to be consistent. And of course, if you want to be duration, you want to have duration, you've got to have some kind of consistency, haven't you? But yeah, too many distractions. And there's even a possibility that we find ourselves doing something which is maybe above our pay grade, or we are doing something which, yes, someone else can do better, and it might be obvious. And so a bit of humility there, could be important. But we've got to think about what is right, and just continuing with something for the sake of it is not necessarily a good idea. And then the fourth line moves. Now, the fourth line is another problem line, and the problem is quite specific. So duration is about seeing something through, and you just keep going. And sometimes you're banging your head against a brick wall. It's not always a good idea to continue in the same direction. And specifically, it seems with the fourth line, we are looking for something. And we are looking for something in an area where this thing does not exist. I think I've had this line quite recently in the last week, certainly 2 weeks. We're looking for something, it's not available. It can't be found. And if we have the spirit of duration, we will just keep looking. We will keep spinning our wheels, looking for something. It's not there. It cannot be found. You can have, a treasure hunting equipment, and you can have the most advanced treasure hunting equipment in the world, and you can have an acre of land, and you could just keep going because you think there's going to be a gold coin there. But if the gold coin isn't there, it doesn't matter what you do, you are not going to find it. And maybe that is the problem. And so don't push it too far. I mean, you could. Sun conjunct Uranus is quite a stubborn combination. Once we do something, we keep going, and we always think about Uranus as about a revolutionary influence, but it can be very stubborn, and so that's not something we want to do. And we get a movement. So we've got two moving lines. So this moves to a different hexagram, and it moves to hexagram number 7, which is the army. And the army is about a group of people, and it is suggesting that if we want to get anything done, we might be better off doing it with other people, being part of a formation, part of some wider collective where everyone knows their responsibility. Of course, we're in an army. It's important everyone knows who's a follower, who's a leader. Depends on the situation, does it? Are we the follower? Are we the leader? And so, if we just try, it's almost like if we try to do everything on our own, then in the end, it's not going to work. We'd like to do things on our own. We're very stubborn about it. But if we engage other people's help, but it's not just other people's help, it's like becoming part of something else, becoming part of something quite collective, where we have our responsibility and we know what we can do, we know who we should listen to, and maybe we need to be told what to do. Maybe we need to listen to another person's orders, and not feel we always have to be making the decision, because sometimes when we make a decision ourselves, we reach a conclusion. This is the conclusion. And that's it. No more that has to be said about it. And we just keep going on, and it just doesn't work. So the army is asking us to look at things from a more collective view. And even if you're on your own, the army could work. And it's just being aware that you are not alone, that you can't do things alone, and you have to do things with the help of all the resources that you can bring together. And the resources might be the past. You might be thinking about the past, people from the past, memories from the past, and you can also try to understand what's happening in this world, and just bring everything together, and just realize that you are part of a functioning whole, but you are not just one individual who has to make all the decisions. In fact, some of these decisions are perhaps being made for you, and that could make things a lot easier. And so the big aspect today is a conjunction between the Sun and Uranus, which is what I now want to talk about. So here is the chart for this Sun-Uranus conjunction, which here it is. So it takes place just after midnight if you're in London. So 12:32 a.m. midnight on Sunday. So it would be 1:32 a.m. if you're in continental Europe, most of continental Europe, Western continental Europe. Then if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the Sun conjunct Uranus will take place earlier, and it will take place on Saturday. And so this Sun conjunct Uranus, it happens every year, but this conjunction is quite close to Algol. Algol is the fixed star associated with death, destruction, disaster, malice even. Now it's not exactly on Algol. I mean it is a bit off, and so clearly the further away the Sun and Uranus are from Algol, the less impact they're going to have. So let me just check to see how far they are from Algol. 0 degrees, 46 minutes. So 46 minutes, it's not exactly there, but it certainly colours the Sun-Uranus conjunction, and it does, I think, make it more difficult. And what intensifies the Sun-Uranus conjunction further is the fact that it is semi-square Venus. So here's Venus at 12:16 Aries. So in fact, the Sun-Uranus conjunction is at 27:18 Taurus. So Venus is almost exactly semi-square the Sun-Uranus conjunction. So that makes me think that this Sun-Uranus conjunction could actually be quite a big event, because it is triggered by Venus. And so what do you expect with Sun-Uranus conjunction? I mean, Sun-Uranus conjunction can be about power, the display of power. That's Sun-Uranus. I want my way. It is very stubborn, and stubborn is a word I've used quite a lot in this video. And also, it's dramatic. It's revolutionary, and there could be sudden change. It might feel that that's the only way of making things happen. If people aren't going to change, then they have to be overthrown. So there is certainly a revolutionary aspect, or not an aspect, but a revolutionary nature to this Sun-Uranus conjunction. And the moon on Saturday is making a trine to the Sun-Uranus conjunction. So we think about that trine as being quite a pleasant aspect, but it's just an aspect. It just triggers it. So you could say that Sun, Uranus, Venus, the moon, they're all coming together, and so that really is giving us a feeling that it is a dramatic weekend. And there are other aspects to consider. It is also happening at the same time as Mercury is square Mars, as Mercury is semi-square Saturn, and Mars is moving towards a sesquiquadrate of Saturn. So I do think that this weekend, and moving into the beginning of next week, could be quite dramatic, and certain people are going to be potentially impacted by it. I don't know if there's any point in looking at the astrocartography. I mean, I will, if one sort of takes this as a precise moment. One other thing, what makes it even more problematic is Black Moon Lilith, true Black Moon Lilith. Here's true Black Moon Lilith at 25:35 Scorpio. So true Black Moon Lilith is opposition the Sun and is opposition Uranus, which makes me think that there could actually be something rather nasty about this Sun-Uranus conjunction. Now, quickly looking at the astrocartography, I'm not convinced this is a necessarily a especially useful exercise, but I think just very quickly, I don't see the harm in it. What is going on at the precise moment of that Sun-Uranus conjunction. So you might, for example, want to look at all the places which are where the Sun and Uranus are exactly on the IC. So if you're interested in the Americas, you can see that here you see these are all the places where Sun and Uranus are on a descendant. So it goes through Central America, goes through Cuba. So the Cuban government might have to be a bit careful with the Sun-Uranus conjunction, and then it sort of goes through Canada. So Cuba is sort of a population center that the Sun-Uranus conjunction impacts. Also, my geography is pretty bad, but I'm thinking that might be Panama. So there may be Central America. What happens in Panama? I know. Donald wants Panama. He certainly wants a canal zone. I don't think we're going to really see American troops in Panama, but that might be a part of the world to be looking at. Then turning to Asia, the Sun-Uranus conjunct. It's sort of conjunct on Calcutta and Nepal. There is so you can see there's Calcutta, sort of the eastern India, Sun-Uranus conjunction, and that goes through Nepal. So that sort of goes through Kathmandu. So Calcutta, eastern India might be somewhere, and Nepal might be somewhere to look for. And then as far as Europe is concerned, well, Europe goes through Nigeria, the Sun-Uranus on the IC, and then it goes up through France, goes through Brussels, Belgium. So eastern France, Brussels, NATO maybe, that's where NATO is centered. So Europe might feel the impact of Sun-Uranus on the conjunction, the Sun-Uranus conjunction on its IC. So it could be, rather destabilizing, and so that's a view of it. I mean, I should quickly sort of look at the 90-degree dial. So Sun-Uranus conjunction, there is the Sun-Uranus conjunction there. You can see that this aspect, the Sun-Uranus conjunction, is making a semi-square to Venus. So there we see that Venus is opposition Sun-Uranus, because the semi-squares and sesquiquadrates, they show up as oppositions on the 90-degree dial. So that's that gives us an idea. I mean, there are other midpoints one might want to look at. I mean, one midpoint it is actually on, or two midpoints are on the Cupido-Hades, on the Cupido-Hades midpoint, and it's also on the Cupido-Kronos midpoint. And I was talking about the Cupido-Hades midpoint in my last video, and it is really trying to force people together. And it also Cupido Kronos is about government. It's about governments trying to create agreements amongst themselves, and with the Hades influence, it's about forced agreements. And we've already looked, but on Friday we had the meeting between Russia and Ukraine. I think it lasted a couple of hours. It doesn't look as if it's necessarily going anywhere, but I've only just read the news reports about it, so I haven't really had too much time to consider it. So, those are a few thoughts about the 90-degree dial. And then I wanted to just finish by just considering a few famous people who might be influenced by this Sun-Uranus conjunction. So, let's start with a couple of celebrities who I don't necessarily find especially interesting. But David Beckham, the former footballer, he's always in the news, and David Beckham has Taurus rising, so he's got 2754 Taurus rising. He's actually got Mercury rising as well, and so this new moon, Sun-Uranus conjunction on Algol is on his ascendant, and so it may be something going on in David Beckham's life. He may be impulsive about something. He probably needs to be careful over the weekend. I mean, I'm always going to say that. I mean, what can it mean? I mean, David Beckham is not, as far as I know, involved in anything, especially serious or involving risk. But David Beckham does have moon right at the end of Capricorn, conjunct the midheaven. That's in a way quite a nice moon in a way. I mean, it's very focused on the material side of things, and he certainly knows how to look after himself, and probably helped by his wife Victoria. But we have this full moon with the moon conjunct Uranus trine, Sun conjunct Uranus trine the moon, and it sort of gels with David Beckham's chart. Now, it might be something he does which is exciting, which pushes him into the limelight, but it might be just something he does which he doesn't think it through, and it might not work out, and maybe David Beckham will be a little bit sort of accident prone. And another celebrity who I have even less interest in is Taylor Swift. So Taylor Swift, I don't have a time of birth for Taylor Swift, which means that I'm especially uninterested in her, but she has her Mars at 2653 Scorpio. I mean, this is a noon chart. So Taylor Swift will have a Sun-Uranus conjunction opposition her Mars. Now, that may say something about whatever relationship she's involved in. I've forgotten the man who she's supposed to have a relationship with. I can't remember. Travis, is it Travis something? I don't know. I think that's his name. Let me see if I can find him. That's right, Travis Kelce. Is she still involved with him? So that may say something about what's going on in her life, because it's Mars, and Mars can get projected. So Mars might be the men in her life. Now, interestingly here, if we look at Travis Kelce's chart, I wasn't expecting to talk about this, but there is something to talk about here. By the way, I do not have a time of birth for Travis Kelce, so I don't want to put Placidus house cards there and give you the illusion that I have a time of birth. So Travis Kelce has his Venus at 26 Scorpio, and Taylor Swift at 27 Scorpio, and Taylor Swift has her Mars at 27 Scorpio, 26, 27 Scorpio. So Uranus is opposition, a really key point of a synastry between the two. So it could have an impact on their relationship, for better or for worse, but it's Uranus, Sun conjunct Uranus opposition. That you'd expect that not to be an easy aspect. So maybe her relationship with Travis Kelce, if that relationship is still around, I don't know, I haven't been following the story, but if that relationship is still in existence, it could put that relationship under a fair amount of pressure. So that is a possibility. Now, another person who may be influenced by this Sun-Uranus conjunction is someone who hasn't been in the news recently because he's in prison, and that is Sam Bankman-Fried, of sort of FTX fame. Is it FTX? Is that right? He had this cryptocurrency company, and there was fraud. People thought they were buying Bitcoin, but in fact, the company was doing something else with it, and it was this big bankruptcy, and it had an impact on crashing the crypto market. When it happened a few years ago. So Sam Bankman-Fried, like David Beckham, has his ascendant at 27 Taurus. And so this Sun-Uranus conjunction is on Bankman-Fried's ascendant, and it's hitting him. It's hitting him quite hard. And so, this is a time, he is in prison. I think he's in a federal prison, and Venus is semi-square his ascendant. We need to look at, well, not we, but the prison authorities need to look after Sam Bankman-Fried and make sure he's okay while there is this aspect on his ascendant. It must be tough for him. Whatever you think of him, that is going to be difficult. So yeah, hopefully he gets any care that he might need. And turning to British politics, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, again, don't have a time of birth for her. Her Mercury is at around 27 Aquarius, so 27, 28 Aquarius. So this Sun-Uranus conjunction is hitting her Mercury. So that might be about her own realizations. And Mercury is about her thought, her thinking, and Sun-Uranus hitting at, she starts to see something. Maybe she starts to see something about the British economy. Maybe she needs to start to see more stuff about the British economy over the weekend, and she realizes this isn't good. That is another sort of manifestation of it. And another Labour politician is Angela Rayner. So Angela Rayner, I think she's Deputy Prime Minister, and she has her Mars at 26, 22 Leo. So, and she's also got Venus-Mars square, so she's sort of got Venus there as well. But and she's got a Mars-Uranus. She's got a Mars-Uranus square in her chart as well. So and the South Node, North Node is involved. So this is quite an important configuration in her chart. And so this Sun-Uranus conjunction is really potentially messing things up for her and making her annoyed. There is a view that she's rather annoyed about some of the Prime Minister, her Prime Minister Keir Starmer's policies. She doesn't seem amused by a lot of it. And so there might be a point of friction, a point of clash regarding her and other people in her political world, although it could be something about her personal life, and it just might be something that we never find out what's going on. And more politicians or former politicians, he's supposed to be gone, but let's not forget Justin Trudeau. His midheaven at 27-17 Taurus. He's got Sun-Uranus conjunction on his midheaven. So Justin Trudeau might not be entirely happy. Issues about what is he doing with his life? Where is he going? Now he's no longer Prime Minister. And so I don't know what he's up to. He may be trying to have an impact. He may be trying to do something, but it may be difficult for him. And also he's got Venus making a semi-square to his midheaven. So he's someone who blasts from the past we might be interested in. And another blast from the past is, of course, the former president, Joe Biden. So Joe Biden has his sun at 27 Scorpio. So his sun is under actually quite a lot of pressure. And so, with Sun-Uranus conjunction opposition to Sun, he could be accident prone. Joe Biden, even when he was president, he was, falling down the stairs on Air Force One. And so he needs to be looked after. I'm sure he's got lots of people protecting him and making sure he doesn't get himself into trouble. But with the Sun-Uranus conjunction, opposition his sun, it is his demi-solar return, so it's his half solar return. So when the sun is opposition to where it was when he was born, is also the time when he has this Sun-Uranus conjunction opposition to sun. So Joe Biden, he really needs to be looked after. So that's just a warning there. So if you are one of Joe Biden's carers, just make sure you do your job. But then you probably haven't got time to be listening to this video. And So turning to more sort of active politicians, well, Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, he has his Mars at 2645 Leo. So that means that this Sun-Uranus conjunction is going to be square his Mars. So Benjamin Netanyahu, what's he up to? He is under a lot of pressure because there is a view that him and Trump, they don't get on with each other. When Trump visited the Middle East, he didn't first go to Israel. He first went to Saudi Arabia. That's, where Trump's priorities are. And so there is, for Benjamin Netanyahu, anger there. He might lash out. This might say something about what he's going to do in Gaza. But of course, if you've got Sun conjunct Uranus square your Mars, it might be that he has to deal with something. So if he is not attacking somewhere, or whether it's through his military or through what he says and how he gets on with Trump, we should not forget, by the way, that Trump also has his Mars at 26, 27 Leo. So this Sun-Uranus conjunction is hitting a major connection between him and Benjamin Netanyahu. So this might be about an issue between the two men. But it could just be some event that Benjamin Netanyahu just has to respond to. It may not just be about Trump. And as far as Trump himself is concerned, well, it's not just Trump; it's his wife. Here's Melania. So Melania has her Venus. She has her Venus at 28 Taurus. So this Sun-Uranus conjunction is right on her Venus, and this Venus is, it's not going to be projected. It's her, and so she might be annoyed about something. She might be quite willful. I mean, I think Melania is going to be quite stubborn with the Sun-Uranus conjunction on her Venus, and again, she may, in her own way, cause some problems for her husband, or she may respond in a negative way to what her husband is doing, and there could be a little bit of friction there in the Trump family. And just reminding us of Trump's chart. Here is Trump's chart, and there is his Mars at 2647 Leo. Now, on was it July the 13th? Let me just check. So last year when we had that assassination attempt, which was a very predictable assassination attempt, when we had that assassination attempt, I think it was July the 13th, wasn't it? Yeah, we had July the 13th. Yeah, we had a Mars. We had Mars conjunct Uranus on July the 13th at 26 Taurus, which was square his Mars. So we had that assassination attempt. Now we have got Sun conjunct Uranus square his Mars. So you could argue that we actually have a configuration which is similar to what we had at the time of the assassination attempt. Now, I'm sure that Trump will be looking after himself. If Trump were to be addressing a lot of people, he should be careful. He should not be in public over the weekend. I think that is very important. He should not be putting himself in a position where he is a target. But it doesn't strike me as being quite as difficult and quite as exact as it was on July the 13th. But I still think that those looking after Trump and his, they need to watch out with this. I mean, it may be that there's some attempt on him, but it could be a weekend where there is heightened risk. Though I think it more likely with this aspect, with the Sun-Uranus conjunction aspecting his Mars, that it just might be about irritation, annoyance. His fights may not be with potential assassins, but could be with political leaders, both at home and abroad. And we've already seen that that Trump's Mars is conjunct Benjamin Netanyahu's Mars, so a lot of scope there for Trump to have an argument with the Israeli Prime Minister. So, as you can see, the Sun-Uranus conjunction is not trivial. It's something we do need to pay careful attention to, and I hope that you have enjoyed this video. If you have enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be very grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again very soon.